Yeah.
Welcome in GC Live, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark. Y'all know the drill. Brought to you by our buddy Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage, clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. If you're in the market for a new home, just call Clint. That's pretty much it. He'll walk you through everything else. Hit him up, clint.hammond.com. It's that simple. No need. I'm just going to say the phone number and the address over and over and over again. Everything else, Clint will take care of. clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. If you want somebody to talk about the game, maybe commiserate with as well, Clint will probably be there for you for that too. However, do not call 803-771-6933 for your Gamecock Central login problems, which I have heard has happened. So that's just for buying houses.
Oh.
So call Clint for that. He probably can't help you with your password. But Chris, man, so a lot of this show I think will be similar to the things obviously we talked about during Takeover Hour 107.5. Maybe a little bit more time to go into depth on some of these things. I rewatched the game. I know you did as well. Some areas after rewatching felt honestly just as glaring as they did live. Some issues, maybe I was like, well, maybe not quite as bad as we thought. For the most part, though, and we talked about this earlier, it kind of just confirmed a lot of things we've been talking about all offseason. And, here's the thing. If you're playing a cupcake, if you're playing, Eastern Illinois or whatever, Northern Illinois, Western Illinois, if you're playing one of those teams.
Northern Illinois just beat BC, Wes. No Northern Illinois hate on the chat.
Yeah. I've been in the Gamecock bubble, so I did not know that, Chris. But wow, that's a big win for them. How about that?
That's rough for BC, yeah, no doubt.
Yes. But it almost, Chris, I almost feel like Shane Beamer and even to an extent Dow Loggins, if you go back and just listen to their last two press conferences, they kind of warned us all that this could be the case. Now, you're hoping it's not. They're hoping it's not. You're hoping you get to the game. Maybe you guys step up a little bit. Maybe you don't have preseason games. They've told us that many times. You never really know. But the exact questions we were talking about are the exact issues we are now talking about from Saturday night's game.
They are. It's a great point. Now, Wes, let me, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm trying to prevent you from getting angry tweets and chat comments. I think you were not saying that the staff was setting the stage for it. Guys, we're probably giving up 9 sacks on Saturday, right? I mean, not like that, but you went through it earlier today, and you did it. I should probably just turn it back over to you to lay out all the different things, but literally, we're going to be playing some young guys. Behind our starting 3 wide receivers, we're really not sure. Not really sure about offensive tackle. We're not really sure about depth here. And all those things did play out, right? And when you play a team that is not – I actually like how Mac Brown put it before the game on Saturday. He pointed out a lot of teams have laughers, I think is what he called it, for week 1 opponents. Whew, not the case, right? Not the case for the Gamecocks. There are no laughers on their schedule this entire year, really, when you just go up and down the schedule. And so when you play a Power 5 team that has a quarterback that's getting Heisman buzz, that has a defense that while they have been pretty bad, Wes, last year they were pretty bad, they do have talent. You don't look out at that North Carolina defense and say, man, there's just no, like up front, especially. I had a Clemson fan telling me yesterday, a buddy of mine, pointing out, man, a lot of those dudes playing up front for UNC, they were like, we wanted those guys. So, the question for UNC hasn't been, man, there's no talent on defenses. Why have they not been as good? So we'll see if they, Wes, I'm not saying that's a team that's going to be, Georgia on defense. That's not the case. Could they be better? Maybe. We'll see throughout the course of the year. Point is, you're playing a good team, and good teams tend to take your weaknesses and expose them. And so we did see that. I think we saw that in some areas kind of as expected. And then I think some of the areas where we expected it, it went to another level, right? So the easiest thing I can think of, offensive tackle questions / problems, they were amplified above and beyond, I think, what you and I thought, or probably anybody thought. I figured there might be some issues. 9 sacks, no. Miscommunications like we saw, no. Case and Henry going down in the game, that was a big factor. I think there were some other things that were exposed, quote unquote, that were, but maybe not as bad as I thought. I picked North Carolina to score 38 points in the game, Wes, and they didn't get there. So some of what we expected, some maybe we didn't see coming to the extent that it ended up happening in the game.
Yeah, and here's the problem for people like us, man. We're, no matter what you say, somebody's going to say you're being too harsh, or somebody's going to say you are sugarcoating, whenever you try to point out both sides of it. And so, I mean, there's people on here, video lover, who is ready to shut down the program after one game. And, there will be people who say everything is fine. I think there's probably less people like that after game one. But I think if South Carolina had played the game they played against Florida last year, and God loves comics, is actually reading my mind here. If they had played that game week 1 last year, then you would have people, and I might have been one of them, you would have people predicting South Carolina to win 2 games, if that. By and large, that was the same personnel that turned around and beat Florida, or beat Tennessee and beat Clemson after the Florida game. A lot of people point to, hey, South Carolina put Ja'Kai Moore from tackle to guard last year. They started using Nate Atkins in the backfield as a personal protector in the passing game. They actually made those moves the week before against Florida, if you go back and watch the film.
And they didn't work.
Exactly. So largely the same personnel. They made a couple little tweaks, moved Cam Smith back to nickel. For the most part, same personnel. So I'm not saying South Carolina is going to go score 63 points the next time they play an FBS opponent, against Georgia. That's not happening. But we got to all try to find the context. We got to all try to find the fair line of pointing out what are very valid issues that we all saw Saturday night, while also acknowledging you can get better. You can improve. To run down them real quick, Chris, the issues we talked about, the issues Shane Beamer himself very publicly laid out. You'd said it already. Offensive tackle. That was talked about a ton preseason. Running game offensively in general. Depth at wide receiver once you get past your top 3 guys. Run defense. And then the depth at defensive back once you get past Marcellus Dial, O'Donnell Fortune, Nick Emamori, and DQ Smith. I feel like every single one of those things we saw play a major role in Saturday night's game against an opponent that, I'm with you, man, I'm still waiting to see. I'll have one eye over on UNC for the next few weeks. Did all those guys that were highly recruited but underperformed, did the light bulb come on? Did South Carolina make them look good? Where's the truth in between the two extremes there? So there's a lot to still learn about this team. There's also a lot of issues, some of them correctable. If you're Carolina, you're finding out how can you correct them quickly, because there is no back-to-back Charlotte, SC State matchup towards the early to middle part of this schedule. You got Furman this week, and then you're right back in SEC play, man. So in some ways, I feel like if you're a coach, you don't want to just give up on a guy. You want to give your personnel you picked a chance to work through their issues. However, if you're going to make wholesale personnel changes against Furman, is probably the only week to make that move in the foreseeable future.
So since you mentioned last year, I've kind of got a point on that I want to make, and they almost seem to conflict with each other, but they don't. So just bear with me, people. So last year there were a couple times, at least a couple, where this team was dead and buried, right? Shut the program down, fire everybody and anything associated with the program. This is awful. Everything's terrible. And the Florida game was obviously the big. And look, people had a right to be mad. That was an awful game, an awful performance. All the bad things you can say about it were fair. But it did go to show. And the 2021 season was the same, Wes. The ups and downs of that, right? You beat Auburn, you have a bad performance. You beat Florida, you have a bad performance, right? And last season, we saw some of those ups and downs. But for programs that aren't in the elite status, this sometimes happens, right? So last season, to add to the frustration of those ups and downs and some of those performances was the fact that, particularly on offense, Wes, you looked at it and you said, man, this team has Spencer Rattler and these receivers, and they have Marshawn Lloyd, and they have a veteran offensive line, and they have some capable tight ends. Why can't they put up any points? How do they lay a goose egg against Florida on offense? Your only touchdown being on a special teams fake, right? And because they did have good players, that's why they were able to do what they did against Tennessee and Clemson, and credit the players and the staff for orchestrating that turnaround, right? This year, you're certainly in a place where you have better personnel than 17 points against North Carolina would indicate, right? You've got, I know Juice Wells only played, I think, 19 snaps. You know, you still have personnel where you can put up a better performance than that. The issue is there are still some differences with last year. You don't have Marshawn Lloyd, who was one of the best tackle breakers on the team, Wes, last year. Your backup last year, you kind of had basically kind of 5 co-starters at receiver is kind of how you can look at it, because Jalen Brooks and Josh Vann, they started some games. If they didn't start, they were your key backups you could bring in to play important roles. This year, you have 3 starters, and behind them, you don't feel great, which is the point you made earlier. And then, of course, Wes, the offensive line situation. So I think you could say both these things at once. There is still hope to improve on offense for this team. There are also some questions that this team has to answer in order to improve. And I think some of these things could linger. You know, what South Carolina's offensive line isn't going to become next week or by the end of the season one of the best units in the SEC. That is the reality that is faced this season. However, can they become good enough to be solid? Can they be an average, middle of the pack SEC group? Because, and I'll take this one to my grave, Wes, if the offensive line was average on Saturday, South Carolina probably wins the game, despite playing as poorly as they did. Throw everything else out. If Spencer Rattler has more time, he was good enough on Saturday night to, I think, be able to go out and make some more throws, make some more plays, and for South Carolina to win this game. They stole 3 possessions from North Carolina, came away with, I think, 3 points on those. And a lot of it was tied to pressure and to sacks, ended or destroyed so many drives on the night.
Definitely, man. Yeah, we got the comment section on fire today. I figured we would have some takes. So, one question: what happened to all those 4-star offensive linemen they just brought in? Did they not play? Or is Beamer going to keep the most talented players off the field like he did Bell and that 5-star running back that transferred? First of all, I mean, Marshawn Lloyd played by far the most snaps of any running back last year, and especially until he was hurt. And was their leading rusher. Jaheim Bell, he played quite a bit last year as well. So the question as far as offensive linemen, you really can't expect, no matter how well you recruit that position, for them to just insert an entire offensive line of freshmen to start a season when you have guys that are older, more experienced returning. Now, is there a real possibility we see a bit of a youth movement up front based on what we saw on Saturday night? Of course. And, do you possibly see Tree Babalade get in there? Marquis Anderson, until he had, a setback or two with an injury, was a guy we really thought was going to be in that rotation, probably will be in the future. Tro Ball is a guy who, we've said quietly they're very high on and possibly could play very, very soon, I think. So the youth movement is a possibility, but it's really not fair to just go into a game one against North Carolina in Charlotte and throw 3 4-star offensive linemen on the field. That's a recipe for even less success than we saw on Saturday night, I think. And, Chris, it's run together for me when we've talked about what at this point, but, they're going to have to try some different things at offensive tackle, while simultaneously, I think part of the problem is that position was such a question mark that they were not really able to hit their goal of kind of knowing who the starters were on the offensive line by a certain point in practice. Remember how that was a sense of urgency? That was something they wanted to kind of let those guys come together. I do wonder some of your mental issues, some of your mental errors, I should say, in the game. Did those somewhat come from not having that, hey, these are our 5, let's practice them all together with the ones, let's let them kind of gel together? That to me is something that could potentially be improved as a season progresses. Now, some of your just, I just got physically beat. Some of that, you can improve technique, but some of your physical upside, physical ability, physical talent kind of is what it is.
Yeah, very true. I think, Wes, we're going to see on Saturday against Furman, those 3 offensive linemen that you mentioned, I think we see them in some capacity, right? As long as Marquis Anderson is healthy enough to get in there. Remember, that is the guy that Beamer pointed to in the 2023 class back in the spring, summer, preseason at times. There's a lot of guys that have contributed. They had 19 players, Beamer said on Sunday night, that were seeing their first action. And some of those, not all those were freshmen, but their first substantial action. Some of them were freshmen. Jalen Kilgore, hey, Nick Gamecock hurt. Go in there and play 63 snaps in your first college football game. And I thought he largely answered the bell. Was one of the highest graded players on the defense, actually, on the night. So, Marquis Anderson was the guy, Wes, out of this 2023 class that had Kilgore and Makari Swain and Pup Howard and Desmond Umazulu and Nick Harbor, all these guys. Like, he was the guy that was pointed to, right? So, Wes, side note on Marquis Anderson, if I'm South Carolina, if I'm playing like GM, if I'm on or NCAA 2024, I'm tempted to move Marquis Anderson to tackle. They kind of have settled in on him being an interior guy. Athletically, I think he has the goods to play tackle. I'd be tempted to look at it. But I think we'll see him. I think we'll see Tree Babalade at left tackle. At the bare minimum, Wes, you now need more tackle depth, right? Cason Henry goes down. He was going to be a starter. He was going to have a really good chance to stabilize that right tackle spot. Well, you lose him for the game. That means you needed to solve both tackle spots now in the game, which you obviously didn't do. And then you needed to be able to solve them for future weeks. So at the bare minimum, he's going to get a look for depth, but I think it could end up being more for Tree Babalade as well.
Yes, that'll be something for fans to watch this week against Furman. Obviously, home opener, chance for everybody to get back out there. And, I think it's one of those things. If you're the staff, you don't want to panic. You don't want to be like everybody else and say, hey, this thing's done. But at the same time, you have to make some very difficult decisions about where do you go ahead and make that move? Where do you let guys just kind of continue to try to figure it out and develop? obviously, you look at some guys, Sidney Fugar, not a game he's going to write home about, but also first FBS start. Like is there a lot of room for improvement there? How much different can an offensive line look once they're comfortable, as they've had some experience versus being out there in a first-time situation? I do think I kind of separate some of the play in the interior of the offensive line compared to offensive tackle, to be honest. I thought for his first start on an SEC team, thought Nick Gargiulo actually had
And Wes is gone. Yeah, I was making sure, guys, that I could confirm that Wes was gone. Wes is down with an injury in the first quarter, too, now. Oh, man. Y'all are exactly right. All right. Wes is buffering. Wes has the circle of death. So let's take over. I will take over now and check things out. So I want to give we've been going over some of the bad. I want to hit some of the good. And I think Wes was going there. Nick Gargiulo, he played really well. Highest graded offensive lineman. I thought he and Vershawn Lee at center, Gargiulo at left guard, those guys played, I thought, quite well. And, deserve credit for that. South Carolina's got to obviously find some other answers there. Xavier Luedecke. Now, Xavier Luedecke is a guy that I have been waiting on for probably the last couple years. I remember even hearing about Xavier Luedecke as a freshman. Very first, preseason practice, and just hearing, man, you should see this guy go cover kicks. He's fast. He's big. He's athletic. Right? Wes, do we have you now? I think we got Wes. Here he is.
Am I back?
You're back. We've switched sides, though.
Oh, man.
Hopefully people won't get too thrown off by that.
We're going to upset people.
I was just talking about Xavier Luedecke. So you were about to make a point about Nick Gargiulo. Vershawn Lee, I thought they performed pretty well on the inside, especially Gargiulo. So where I was taking it is we've gone over some of the negatives. We're going to go over more, obviously, from the game that was in the not good category because there was more not good than good, obviously. But to credit where credit is due, Nick Gargiulo, Vershawn Lee, Xavier Luedecke is somebody that I think you and I both have been kind of waiting to break out. And he's shown flashes over it during his career. You think last year, the bowl game catch, the Texas A&M kickoff return for touchdown, but he hasn't put it together consistently. Honestly, man, on Saturday night, there were some plays that Xavier Luedecke made that was kind of like man against boys type of look. He just looks physically superior to the competition sometimes. He had a really good night, and I think his emergence, if he can stay consistent, if he can stay that type of player, you start thinking about having him. You think about having a healthy Juice Wells back. Marion Brown didn't finish the game. You think about that, and that could be quite a solid group. And Xavier Luedecke's got potential, I think, to be a really, really good player this season.
Yeah, he was phenomenal, man. And, I mean, just think about confidence is a heck of a drug. And granted, it helps to also be, 6'3", 220-something pounds.
Right.
4'3", 4'4", 40-yard dash. I think when you're someone who has that baseline ability, that certainly helps. But look at Luedecke and where he is now compared to, even last year, man, the SC State game, it felt like he was really down after that game and just was not playing with a ton of confidence. And, I think when you look at Luedecke and just the ability the baseline talent there. It's always been there. He's been that guy we've talked about several off seasons of, could this be the year he kind of takes it to another level? I think we thought this was the year, Chris, but I don't think we even anticipated what we saw Saturday. Like that was grown man, like you said. That was, future NFL draft pick, potentially high draft pick. And it kind of reminded, like I've never actually compared these two skill set wise at all. Like they're different body types even, but Luedecke kind of reminded me of watching Alshon out there, just in terms of being a big bodied guy and making those one-on-one leaping catches. Like I always kind of saw Luedecke, even at his best, as being a little bit more of an after the catch guy. Really good runner once you can get him in space, can break tackles, use his big frame. But I mean, the catch he made in the bowl game, and then the two deep ball catches, then some of those underneath balls where it looked like, frankly, UNC's defenders were kind of just having to play off because they were worried about Luedecke running past them. All those things are incredibly good signs for the future for South Carolina at that position. And for Luedecke himself, man, that's a guy you got to be pulling for. He's been through a ton in his personal life, has stuck around, has worked through injuries, has worked through development, growing pains, is your latest example of don't give up on a guy just because they're not excelling, just because they're not playing a ton. Even if they have some mistakes early in their career, don't give up, because you can continue to develop as a football player.
Yeah, and I think, Wes, there does come a point with certain guys where you say he probably just doesn't have it, but a lot of times when you do that, it's just tied to athletically they're just not there. That's the reason that you could stay on the Xavier Luedecke bandwagon, like I think we did, because you knew this dude has great size. He's got the size to speed, right? One of the fastest players on the team, even at his size. And then he had some demonstrated ability to do, some special things in terms of playmaking. So that was definitely a positive for the other night. And let me take a question. Wes, I got two questions I want to address. The left side's the producer side, so I'm now taking over the chat too, by the way. So hopefully you don't mind. Golden Sith, appreciate you weighing in. When will we stop with pats on the back for losing not as bad as we thought we would? Not what we're doing. This isn't the Steve Spurrier clap after losing to Auburn, and he got irritated with that. First of all, I didn't even think South Carolina would lose. I had South Carolina winning the football game 41-38, and they didn't. Pointing out a few positives from the game is not an effort to sugarcoat anything. It's not an effort to deflect. It's not an effort to say, oh, well, great job, y'all lost, but not as bad as we thought you would. None of that. Simply pointing out what was good in the game, what was bad in the game. Why did South Carolina lose? What does it mean for the rest of the season? Some of the good things that you saw in the game, Xavier Luedecke, for instance, Spencer Rattler, for instance, those could be critically important because there are at least 11 more games left in this season. So nobody's trying to say congratulations, pat on the back for losing a football game. Just trying to lay out the good and the bad. There was one more as far as a couple people have actually asked Wes, and Wes, I don't even know if you and I will agree on this. I think we will. Why was Mo Kaba covering a kickoff? So Kirby Smart at Georgia has starters playing special teams. Pete Limbo plays special teams. Plenty of starters played special teams for South Carolina last year. Darius Rush played. Nate Atkins played. Jalen Brooks played special teams. And on and on and on. So, Kaba, you got to remember last year was going to play a huge role on special teams before he got hurt on defense against Arkansas. So it's not really atypical. It is definitely unfortunate for Kaba to go down with an injury, regardless of what he was doing. Covering a kick, playing defense, falling down a set of stairs. However it happens, you feel for him. You absolutely hate it for him because, goodness, he just got back and was back for game one. But it is not atypical to have starters playing special teams. Wes, agree, disagree?
Yeah, I mean, you can't have it both ways. And what I mean by that is you can't talk about Pete Limbo and how amazing his special teams are and how happy you are about Pete Limbo's special teams being difference makers, and then say, well, that guy shouldn't be playing on special teams. It's his. He does a very calculated job of balancing out. Hey, this is your role in offense or defense. This is how many units. There's a literal matrix, where he has it all charted out. And from that point, even if a player moves up on the depth chart, hey, we're going to adjust. Where do we need him? Where do we not need him on special teams? Maybe we need him on all these, but we can't use him for all of them. So it moves up to the next guy. And while all 11 are important, Limbo has even given us a little bit of a view into his thought process when he said, hey, this spot is a non-negotiable, talking about in that instance about kickoff return. So are some spots on special teams a little bit more important potentially? I think, yes, that's safe to say. But you know what? If the guy is going to be the best special teams coordinator in the country, have the best special teams by multiple metrics last year, I can't turn around and say, well, why are you playing this guy? Why are you playing? In this case, Kaba, I understand he was coming off an injury. Like, I get that point. We had Kaba on the Garnet Trust Hour. Seemed like a great dude. Like, my heart absolutely goes out to him. That it stinks. Like, it stinks. It sounded the way Beamer said, without speculating, we can all read through the lines. It sounded like it's very serious.
Yep.
So, I hate that for him. But I don't think you can blame a special teams decision. Frank, I didn't even see when it happened, when the actual injury happened. But it's it kind of was one of those football injuries where you hate it for the kid, for the person. But I can't blame anyone for putting him on the field. He was, Chris, one of their best special teams guys before he even kind of took over as a linebacker, at the beginning of last year as their starter.
Yeah, he was going to play a huge role last year on special teams. I think he was a special teams player of the spring last year. And then won some spring preseason accolades too within the team for his work on defense. So definitely, and I think that's a natural segue, Wes. So Kaba is out, right? I mean, Shane Beamer's alluded to it. He's going to be out a while. It doesn't sound good with what's been said publicly and what we've heard privately. Not a good situation for Kaba. Bam Martin Scott, another key guy on special teams and the defensive linebacker rotation, Wes, key reserve. He also did not play. We knew that going in, that he was doubtful for the game or that he'd be out, and that he probably would be back for week 2 against Furman. I don't think, Wes, that Shane Beamer addressed him specifically on his Sunday teleconference, Bam, but should be back for week 2. Pup Howard traveled, but did not play against North Carolina. Didn't see any snaps. So Debo Williams and Stone Blanton, Wes, I thought those two played pretty well from what we saw. It was a mixed bag in the run game for sure. But I thought they played pretty well, but they are going to need some help. Coming into this year, what were we talking about? They're going to have more depth at linebacker this season. The starters won't have to play 60, 70, 80 snaps if they get up there. Well, that's a little in doubt now. Mo Kaba's absence is a huge part of that. But to me, that just amplifies the need to get Pup ready. He missed some preseason, seems to be okay now, traveled to Charlotte. You got to get Pup on the field. You got to get Bam back on the field. And now you need to stay healthy there and be able to give Blanton and Debo Williams a breather when they need it.
For sure. I thought, if we're running down the positives, I did think linebacker play, and you can get picky, like, were they perfect? Of course not. Let's see. Somebody made some good points on here. I lost it, but his God loves comics again. You can get picky about it, but really, this is both those guys' first game as starters. I thought in terms of tracking the football, being aggressive, playing with energy and effort, and frankly, having the size and the physicality needed. I thought those guys. I thought it was a great first effort for them because you would think they're only going to get better. They both played in reserve roles. Stone had to step up and play as a backup middle linebacker, probably a little bit ahead of schedule last year, a little bit ahead of when he maybe should have, as he was a true freshman. But I mean, I thought that the offseason in the weight room for Stone Blanton and kind of just trimming down a little bit, getting more comfortable, getting more confident. I mean, I thought he and Debo both looked the part on Saturday night. I think if you're a Carolina fan and you're wanting to feel a little bit better, the run defense, I think they average 4.3 yards a carry. That's not great when you give up here, let me pull it up. You give up 168 yards total on 39 carries. A few of those are actually the kneel downs. So those need to be taken out. So the average is a little bit higher than that, frankly, if we're being completely honest. But, dude, those guys give you hope that this run defense actually can continue to get better as the season progresses. I thought run defense was kind of in a category, if you're going to, do level of concern, do they still need to keep improving as a total run defense? Yes. Is it on the level of what I think your concern would be with offensive tackle? I would say, in my opinion, probably not. There were some good signs, and it's mostly due to, hey, those linebackers looked the part and looked kind of like what I think Clayton White thought he had in the preseason when he was talking those guys up.
Yeah, I think they were active, Wes. Debo Williams has always been a guy that he had some big hits in the game. That's his game. He's gonna come up and strike somebody. For him, I think he's played. His first 2 years, Wes, he played in every single football game available to him since he got to South Carolina. But it wasn't until last season where he took on, more of an important role as a position player, now stepping into that starting role. So you're right. He can get better. And I think he made a lot of strides in the offseason. Blanton, I think there were some key things for him. We've been over him before, right? He's always a guy that's been real smart, can find the football. He's not going to be, Sky Moore in terms of his athletic giftedness, but he's trimmed some weight. He's healthier, and he does always seem to be around the football. So got to find those guys some help. It was a mixed bag, Wes. South Carolina, I think the run was actually something that I think people were not talking about enough going into this game. Talked about Drake May and his arm and the system, but we knew Chip Lindsey would want to run the football, and we knew that Drake May was North Carolina's leading rusher last season. They did a pretty good job on May. He did spring a couple runs, right? But nothing huge. Marion Hampton, South Carolina, he kind of weird. He had 2 touchdowns from some red zone carries, but then he only averaged 2-something yards a carry. British Brooks did go over 100 yards on the other hand on, I think, 15 carries, had a few explosive runs in there. So a mixed bag, need to get better there. And then, Wes, I think even some good in the bad when you look at up front and in the secondary. So the bad, obviously, couple one-on-one situation touchdowns that you give up. One of them was even tougher to deal with because it was a ball that Drake May just kind of threw up, and you don't get your head around. You give up that touchdown. That's tougher to swallow than, getting run by and your quarterback dropping a ball in. That was disappointing, but I thought, Jalen Kilgore played well. Marcellus Dial, I thought, played well. Kawan Banks got an interception. O.D. Fortune got an interception on a really nice play. that, those types of plays kept the Gamecocks in it. And then, of course, Wes, I think if the offensive line was the biggest disappointment, especially at the tackle position on offense, defensively, biggest disappointment had to be, not affecting Drake May, right? And so you look at the edge position in particular, no sacks on Drake May. It's an offensive line that gave up 40 sacks in 2022. Gamecocks go without a sack. Tough pill to swallow. I think 5 hits on Drake May, 9 hurries, I think is what I got from PFF data earlier. Really tough to swallow that. So that's another one of those areas where this was an area of concern, and it was probably worse. Is that fair to say, Wes, than we were anticipating going in?
Yeah. If everybody wants to bear with me, I think the depth chart just came out. So the updated one. So I'm trying to look through that so we can talk about it, and also trying to post it on the Insiders Forum real quick. But so, Chris, in the meantime, this is Monday, which I think for our ad schedule is Bird Dogs Day. I know Chris has been rocking his Bird Dogs quite a bit. We got a beautiful care package when we first started this from Bird Dogs with many options, joggers, shorts, that polo, which I think is frankly my favorite part of our care package. I think Chris's favorite part, though, is those shorts that have the built-in, basically they're gym shorts on the inside and khakis on the outside. And also, Chris, you can get a little prize if you go to birddogs.com/Gamecocks or put in Gamecocks in the promotional field when you buy something from birddogs.com.
Yeah, man. Outstanding stuff from Bird Dogs. These shorts are incredible. I've got them on again today. Don't judge me. They are amazing. If you go check them out at birddogs.com, you get yourself a free gift with the promo code Gamecocks. I think, Wes, you can still go birddogs.com/Gamecocks. That'll get you right there. It'll automatically populate the code for you. Or if you're just on birddogs.com, get whatever you want to order, put in the promo code at checkout, and you can get your free gift there too. But we got the pants, Wes. Those are awesome. Shorts, definitely my favorite. The shirt, the hat, super cool gear. Keeps you cool all day, super comfortable. But you also look a little more than casual, Wes. You can look good with a pair of Bird Dogs. You can go to some functions with them. So they're outstanding. Definitely recommend checking them out. They're my absolute favorite since we got turned on to them.
Yeah, they're pretty sweet. Go check it out. You will get a free gift by using that code Gamecocks. Yeah, check it out. Promise you, they are awesome. So, all right, depth chart. Y'all, like I said, hang tight with me. So, Chris, I do not have the old depth chart in front of me to pair, but I do remember most of it.
Yep.
And I'm seeing, so left tackle, Sidney Fugart or Jackson Hughes, that pretty much stays the same. Right tackle actually now says Tyshawn Wanamaker or Ja'Kai Moore. Ja'Kai Moore also still, oh, wow, they've actually added left and right tackle on here now. So
Yep.
Ja'Kai Moore, your starter at right guard still, but also listed as an or starter at right tackle along with Tyshawn Wanamaker. Let's see. Quarterback's the same. Connor Cox has been added to the depth chart at tight end.
Yep.
He is now listed as Joshua Simon's backup. He was obviously injured last week. Running back is the same. Let's see. Defensive end, Drew Tuazama, who played around 20 snaps in his South Carolina debut. He is now listed as an or starter at defensive end. So you got Tyreek, JT Gear, and Drew T. Defensive tackles are the same. Other edge spot, which is outside linebacker, is what it's listed on here. Jordan Strong or Brian Thomas or Des Yu. And let's see, they have added Bam Martin Scott to the depth chart at will linebacker. No Mo Kaba, as expected. He had a serious injury, it appears. And then at the nickel spot, Keenan Nelson Jr. listed as a starter. And then second team is David Spalding or Kawan Banks Kawan, of course, had a big old interception in the game on Saturday. Kawan's an active guy, man. He's kind of one of those guys you overlook a little bit because he doesn't look necessarily as big as some of the other guys. But I mean, even going back to high school, kind of had a knack for making plays. But I mean, anything on that surprises you?
No surprises. Here's something I'm curious about, Wes. So at nickel, since first thing that popped in my head since you were talking about it, is Spalding going to be healthy? Because he was out there on Saturday, but he pulled up with what looked like, I think, Wes, a hamstring. So is he healthy? And can Banks make a push, right? Keenan Nelson played really well in run defense. He did have a couple plays he gave up in pass coverage. Kawan, again, like you said, not the biggest guy, but man, he kind of has a knack for getting bigger players on the ground. And then he's played corner, so he's got some coverage ability. I'll be curious to see if he can make a little bit of a move. It'll be interesting, Wes, to see, does South Carolina definitely get JT Gear back for week 2? If so, does he start, or does Tyreek start, or does Drew T start? Drew T played, I think, and we were wondering this going into the game, Wes, does Drew T play more because Gear was out? The answer is probably yeah. He ended up playing, I think, 22 snaps in the game. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. I was also curious, Wes. First of all, I wasn't sure that we get a new depth chart, so we actually have one. No freshmen on it at all. None of those 3 guys that we talked about earlier, in Tro Ball, Marky Anderson, Tree Babalade. But do we see any of them? Are any of them getting, increased reps during practice this week, especially Tree at a tackle spot? Maybe so. And so that'll be an interesting thing in the Furman game. Do they just do they roll with starters as we see on this depth chart? Do they give someone else a shot for, right off the bat? Or do we see some guys rotate in to see how they do? That'll be really, really interesting. But no huge changes aside from putting Ja'Kai Moore as an or at right tackle so far.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Furman in this matchup, of course, as the week progresses. But you look at it from a physical standpoint, South Carolina should be able to push them around a little bit. So you would say this is a chance to try and work some of those freshmen in. From another standpoint, though, this is a Furman team that for their level is very, very good. So you can't look past them, or with this new stupid clock, you may wake up and there's 7 minutes left in the third quarter and it's a 1-score game. So you got to remember that as well. We've got too much time to talk about the actual football team to spend too much time on the clock, but it's our show, so we can talk about what we want. Chris, I hate the new clock rules, man.
I don't like it. The games go too fast. It happened at South Carolina's game. Watching Florida State LSU last night, I'm like, man, this game's flying by. I want more plays in the football game. I like watching football. I want more football plays. So I'm totally with you.
I'm curious to see how it affects the overall final number of, on average, how many plays are in a football game. I'm curious to see how it affects the ability for teams to come back if they're down by a couple of scores late. It just, once you get to like the mid to latter parts of the third quarter, I feel like you're already starting to count possessions, and that really wasn't the case in college football before. Like, yeah, you could count them out, but you kind of were like, all right, there's time. It starts getting to that point now, and I think you're saying there's not much time left. So, I don't like it. I hope it gets changed after this season. It doesn't, I can't really put it in the words. It just doesn't feel right. Like sitting in the stadium, it felt like the game was just flying. And so I've said it many times. I'm a huge Major League Baseball fan. Their rules to speed up the game have actually been, I think, very helpful, but those things don't change the actual game. Major League Baseball's rule changes involving the clock, there's still the same number of pitches. There's still the same number of outs. All the actual game itself was still the same. This affects the actual football game itself, the way it is played. So I don't know, not a fan at all. I think a lot of people I talk with, Chris, sort of felt the same way. I don't know anybody that was like, man, I'm loving these new clock rules. I really just like this added commercial that I'm seeing instead of that extra drive on the field that I'm seeing. So, yeah, not a fan. Chris, let's see. We've hit on some positives. I thought O.D. Fortune actually had a pretty good debut as a starter. He played physical, played hard. Luke Doty obviously made some plays and looked explosive, I thought, with the ball in his hands. So that's a positive. Talked about Luedecke. Rattler was a warrior, I thought. I mean, considering the level of duress that he was under, I thought he gave South Carolina a chance to go win the game. All right, going back to some of the negatives before we close this thing out. How much of this is fixable, Chris, and how much of it is going to be an issue all season long? And when I say fixable, I'm not really saying it turns from, a huge question to being a strength, but how much of it can be turned to being, at least not a massive weakness?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is going to make me look bad, but my honest answer is I don't know yet, right? Like we're going to see, and there's not a lot of time to figure it out. If this team will have to play better than we saw to beat Furman is the bottom line, right? Now you have a much greater margin for error against a team like Furman than you do North Carolina. That's also true. You can say both those things. So if South Carolina plays, if it looks a lot better, if they beat Furman and they do it where it's not what you described, Wes, and you look up and there's 7 minutes left in the game and it's a 1-score game, we've kind of seen those movies before with South Carolina against quote unquote undermatched teams. We've seen that, we've even seen them being on the losing side of that. But we're not going to be able to, if South Carolina looks much better next week in a win, we're not going to be able to say, okay, all fixed now. We won't know. I think Mississippi State is probably the best. That's your next measuring stick, right? Like if you go out, or even if you go out and just compete really well against Georgia, you can say, okay, this team's improving. But Mississippi State is your best chance right now where we sit at a win where you can learn something and kind of assess it. I think, Wes, you got to clean up some things in the run game. The biggest thing to me is, can you find a way to manufacture more pressure? You don't have 3 NFL guys out there at corner and nickel right now like you did last year with Dial and Smith and Rush. You've got 1 NFL guy, maybe some others, right, but not proven enough yet. So what that means is you've got to find a way to manufacture some more pressure. Can that get fixed? I don't know. You're not going to play Drake May every week, but you're going to play a lot of really good quarterbacks. You're going to play better offensive lines than you saw against North Carolina, particularly at the tackle position. So whether it's some adjustments you can make, do you play Tonka outside more, for instance? Do some of these other guys just get a little better? Do you get healthier? Does JT Gear give you something? Schematically, can you make some adjustments? That, to me, is the biggest thing that has to change. I don't think they go from what we saw Saturday to all of a sudden a team that can just create pressure on demand. But is there room to go up? Can they go up is a better question than there's obviously room to go up. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Probably the best way to leave it at, honestly. You're reading my mind, man. This week, do you learn? Even if you rush for 200 yards, doesn't really tell you everything. Even if you rush for 2 yards against Georgia, doesn't really tell you anything. But Mississippi State, which already as a game I think some fans were kind of circling as a win now just becomes a massive, massive game for South Carolina. So we're not there yet, but I do think if you're going to break down this schedule, the way Carolina fans feel after that one will be huge going into what will quickly be the second third of this 2023 South Carolina football slate. I'll tell you, Chris, you can have a lot of concerns about the football team if you want. One thing you will not have concerns about or any taxiety about will be your taxes. Thanks to our friends at Liberty Tax. And I know you've already made the pre-snap movement in order to go ahead and prepare yourself for next tax season with our friends at Liberty Tax.
Yeah, Larry's like in the NFL, the offensive coordinator talking in your ear beforehand. Honestly, that's not even a good analogy, Wes. Larry's just a cheat code. Doing things the right way, but making sure you can get out in front of it. Just full of knowledge. He's going to get you the best possible return while staying within the IRS guidelines, government guidelines, and does an absolutely outstanding job. Gets you a game plan together so that you're ready for tax season. And if you do like I did, you can get well out in front of it so that when tax season rolls around, absolutely no taxiety. Super responsive, super knowledgeable, does an outstanding job. Highly recommend. The folks at Liberty Tax with Larry, 2 locations out in Irmo, both on St. Andrews Road, 803-462-5576.
Appreciate Larry and Liberty Tax. He can help you just like he helped Chris. Check him out. All right, we're at an hour. I think that's it for today. We will kind of turn the page next show, I guess. So next one will be Mike on Tuesday night, Talking Tuesdays with Mike Uva. Then Chris and I will be back on Wednesday. And by then, dude, we will have heard from Shane Beamer on Tuesday. So that will be an injury update. And then we will have heard from the coordinators, which will be very interesting. I still maintain Dow Loggins did kind of, in some ways, warn us this could be coming with his comments last week. So, again, like Chris said, not that you felt warned for 9 sacks. That's nobody ever expects that. But you know the crazy thing about those 9 sacks, Chris? It felt like 9 sacks while watching it, if not more.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like when I heard 9 sacks, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. So they will, of course, look to clean up those areas this week going into the Furman game. So next time you hear from us, again, we will have plenty more to kind of turn the page on and plenty more to chew on from Shane Beamer and the coordinators on Wednesday. Appreciate everybody that joined in on the chat. Appreciate everybody for commenting. Please subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on whatever platform you like to listen to your podcast. For Chris, I'm Wes. This has been Gamecock Central Live, presented by Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you.